Surf Splendor.
It's a problem when you have kids too, because it's their stuff. Like there's this one little Nike hat that my kid had when he was like earliest of days until 1 years old, let's say. I want to put that thing in a lucite box and just have it in the living room to look at because it was so dang cute to see on his head, you know?
100%. And kids totally changes the paradigm. One, because they're growing through stuff so quickly. So there's always this, right, this kind of flow of used, still love, not used. And like you said, don't want to ever give it away, have to give it away. I just went on a shoot and we visited, it's called Rancho Obi-Wan. The Star Wars nerds might know of it. And this guy has been collecting Star Wars for years and has the Guinness Book of World Records now for the most memorabilia. And it's the most awe-inspiring thing I've ever seen. I mean, and he has so much stuff, right? And then once you hit that level, then now he says Lucasfilm actually is sending stuff, and people send stuff, there's fan art, and so it just keeps growing. And their goal is to actually make a museum, like a traditional pop art memorabilia museum. But the few things I hold on to, I saw that and I was like, okay, there's a whole nother level of, I have a few surfboards, scattered around the globe. Not Devin Howard size collection, but anyways.
So is Rancho Obi-Wan, that is different than Skywalker Ranch?
Yes, it is. Skywalker Ranch is the facility that George Lucas built in the late 70s, really. And that houses Lucasfilms, which he now sold the rights to Disney. So it gets a little convoluted. Rancho Obi-Wan is just kind of around the corner in Petaluma, California. The guy, Steve, who created it, used to work at Skywalker Ranch and was sort of the head of marketing and really curated the fan experience as they started rolling out the new films. And part of that was that he had this personal collection. And I think through his relationship there, and then after he retired and continued relationship, he's got everything. He's got every action figure. He's got everything ever made. There's a whole warehouse that's not on display of Star Wars stuff. And it boggled my mind. Like, you appreciate the cultural impact Star Wars has had, especially I think if you're a certain age, and if you're a certain age and into filmmaking, even more so. But when you see the amount of stuff that was made, and there's stuff from Japan and stuff from Germany, it's mind-boggling. It really is a whole universe of cultural nostalgia on a certain level. I have like 4 action figures I've saved that I keep and cherish, and then it was like, oh God, I'm nothing.
Yeah.
But
so can I ask what you were doing there?
No.
Okay. Well, I can ask, but you won't tell.
The Rancho Obi-Wan, it was kind of twofold, but Rancho Obi-Wan, they are looking to curate a museum, and they're going to have to raise quite a bit of money to do it. And some friends of mine that I'm working on a different project on that I can't get too into, but it's been a really fun project about filmmaking and filmmakers. There's a little carryover, and the Rancho Obi-Wan project, we were there to help them build kind of a sizzle reel so that they can go out and fundraise. And I think it got the wheels turning, and part of on the heels of it is why I pinged you, because the discussion I was having with them, and these are two very different worlds, but George Lucas has no interest in a fan museum for Star Wars memorabilia. So it's really the fans themselves that have to step up and figure out how to make this. And I'm sure corporations will see the opportunity, and there'll be, hopefully a little momentum there, because what they need to do is hundreds of millions, and it's a huge ask. But
Awesome.
we drove up to Northern California, or Central, depending on who you talk to. And my longtime friend, who's a filmmaking buddy that I grew up with, we were talking about surfing, and he doesn't surf, but has always appreciated what I do. And sort of this idea of where surfing's at with media and media consumption, and how we've lost, I think, a little bit. I just saw Taylor, promoting his new project, and said something to this. I just saw it before you called, but this idea that theater experience and the community that goes around these things. And as we get into our, scrolling and our feed of the day, where is that all going, right? As I talk to you now, it sounds like Surfer Mag is going to be back in print. I think things like that are great, have these tangible things that sort of keep the fabric of the culture connected. And I don't know, I'm kind of on this journey, which I'm always fascinated, as someone interested in filmmaking in and outside of surfing, how people digest media. I'm a traditionalist. I love, that gathering of friends and going to a theater. And I'm curious to see how the audience is going to react, if people are into it, or do people just want the clip of the day on Instagram, or, the free thing on YouTube?
I think about this, certainly in relation to the content that I create as well. Gratefully, the medium that I invested in 10 years ago hasn't really changed, You can still get podcasts through the original medium or the original apps, basically, Apple or whatever. I would not shift to a different medium. Like if I had to be on TikTok in order to do this, I'm just going down with this ship. You know what I mean? Like there's no way I'm going to reinvest and try to figure out the new algorithm on the new platform and how to, any of that stuff. But I think about it for filmmakers because I grew up loving surf films and I grew up going to surf films when they were around. We talked about this previously, but I hosted a screening of your film, Bella Vita, at a AMC theater in Long Beach a decade ago. And Chris Del Moro came and we had the screening. We sold it out to our podcast listeners, So that's nostalgically, that's the experience that I love. But I think that both things can exist in the future. They're just very different numbers of eyeballs that see them. There's somebody who's a filmmaker who can shoot something on an iPhone, put it on YouTube, actually shoot it this morning, put it on YouTube this afternoon, and it'll have a vastly larger audience than maybe what you spent 18 months and a ton of money shooting, just because I don't know, the ways that you can distribute that and display that are just more limited nowadays.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was looking back and saw that Bella Vita conversation we had was episode 50. And what are you on now?
550, 525.
Congratulations. I mean, that's amazing, right?
It's a decade ago. I mean, literally.
Yeah, 10 years of conversations and cataloging, this cultural experience. And I was thinking, because, I put hair gel in, which is reserved for like date night with the wife, maybe a wedding or a funeral. And now it has to be a podcast. That's what I loved about podcasts is, my face for radio, you and I could hide. And I think we did that one at Tyler's shop and had a nice chat. And now there's this video component. And I wanted to ask you, like, do you see that traction on YouTube? Is that higher? No, it's people are digesting it wherever they find it. There's no one that wins over the other. Or...
Well, audio podcast wins for me because that's the way that the show is designed. If I really wanted to get traction on YouTube, it would have to be designed differently. You and I would probably meet in person. We'd have 3 cameras cutting back and forth, cutting away to surf footage as we're discussing it, that sort of stuff. So just the style of what we're doing here today, some people will watch it on YouTube, but it's the smallest percentage. But I have found that I can at least use this video to advertise the audio podcast on Instagram. I could pull a little salacious clip of this conversation, put it on Instagram. Sometimes those Instagram videos get more views than the audio podcast does. There was one clip that kind of went nuts with Brad Gerlach. It got over 1 million views, the Instagram clip itself. And it probably translated to a few extra downloads, but negligible.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I mean, Gerlach's good content always, right?
Yeah.
We got to love Brad. Do you track, and I sorry to turn the tables, but, do you look at what topics maybe get more views, or is it all kind of character guest driven, do you feel?
definitely do not track nor care about that. I don't. So
Yeah.
this is kind of back to the original point that I meant to make and I didn't, which is the kid shooting the iPhone video goes on YouTube, maybe gets millions of
Yeah.
views, right? Confluence probably won't get millions of views.
Yeah.
I've accepted that I'm the Confluence model. I've accepted 1,000 core fans. There was a famous article written by a guy named Kevin Kelly, which is about this modern era of creating content. And he said, cater to 1,000 core fans,
Hmm.
true fans, I think is what he said.
Yeah.
And you can build a business around that. If maybe you're operating in a space that can hit that critical mass of 1 trillion people, but if you're not, don't think that you're ever going to get there. Don't even play that game. Just cater to 1,000 true fans.
Hmm.
And if you can, uh, almost any subculture can have 1,000 true fans, right? So whatever your thing is, focus on that and cater to the core. And let's say you could get them to pay. We have a monthly subscription platform set up for the podcast. So if you can get 1,000 people to give you $5 a month, you know, that's 60,000 bucks a year. Then if you can get them also to buy, let's say 2 t-shirts, then you're up to them spending $100 a year times 1,000. That's $100,000, you know?
Hmm.
So that's a tidy little livable income. And if you can double it, fantastic. Now you're at 200,000, you know, but that's really all you need. Don't think that you're going to need 1 trillion and then sell advertising and, you know, no, there's a way
Yeah.
to do it small. And so that's the model that I'm focused on. So I'm not chasing what's going to be more downloads. I'm just interested in having meaningful or interesting conversations with people in the surf space. That's it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
a small audience of people who want to listen to this, you know?
Sure. Right. A niche within the niche on some levels, and yet a loyal one, right? I mean, I've
Totally.
benefited from so many great things through doing projects, and yeah, Confluence is interesting. That's the new. I call it an experimental film because truly it is an experiment for me, and a little bit of play, in that it's beta testing these different paths to an audience, and the one I'm most excited about is the theater experience with the band playing live to picture and kind of curating it. But it's like a playlist, right? It's a playlist of sessions of my friends, some of which has already been out on social media. You know, it's like against everything I've ever done with a film. um, but in the intent to kind of celebrate that core niche audience in a way that brings people together, has, you do a fun night with a raffle and all that. I think what's been interesting for me is to see, okay, well, does a streaming component or a YouTube component, which I haven't done, does that play better, worse, negligible, all the same, right? um and that's to be determined. It and it's fascinating in the context because I think I sent you an article. Hollywood's really struggling with this. The streaming networks have overspent trying to get new viewership. They're finding people just want to watch old stuff. It's like the reruns of Friends do better than the thing they spend 100 million producing for Netflix. And the suits can't figure it out, and it's not creative people running the system. So it's all of us, I think, are kind of like, okay, well, how is this going to shift? And usually when it gets that disrupted, it does shift, right?
Yeah.
And you see stuff like podcasting comes out and really creates this whole new medium. um I don't know if you've done much. I've been playing around listening to narrative podcasts a little bit, which I know I'm very late to that world. What I find exciting about it is it's hard to get narrative ideas made, especially if there's no IP, right? Intellectual property. So if I write a script and it's expensive, they go, well, if the audience doesn't know about it, we can't produce that. But with the audio podcast world, there is a door, in where you can build that audience as well, that 1,000 people or however many, that you find attracted to it. So it's fascinating because there's just all these different opportunities, and I sometimes wake up wondering where my energy should go, right?
That's the problem for sure. Yeah. And the only answer I have, because all of these mediums are shifting, the landscape is shifting constantly all the time. And even if you invest in a certain platform to share your medium, the rules of practice on that platform change, the best practices change, they shift the algorithm, whatever. So there's no way to actually fully stay engaged and keep tabs on all of that. So the only solution that I have is focus on just making the content, focus on making quality content, and hopefully people will find it. Hopefully you can find the audience. That's been my concern. And I feel confident that I'm able to do that in this media, the podcast medium, but that's my concern for you as a filmmaker is I am on the jury of the Florida Surf Film Festival, and I get to watch incredible films every year. They never, most of them never find the light of day. It's like I watch them and then I know they're searching for distribution deals. And so I'm always keeping a mental note of, I'm curious when that gets released in the future. I'll make sure I let my audience know about that film because I really liked it. And when I look back over the course of the years I've been doing this, it's like 3 of them have gotten distribution deals out of the 24 that I watch every year. And what's unfortunate about that is I know my audience would love to watch all of those films. So it's the content's being created, the audience exists that wants the content, they can't connect.
Where's that merging? Yeah, it's I'm on the email list of they're doing the festival in France right now. I'm blanking on the name of it, and I'm seeing the updates on what's screening, and it's the same thing. I'm like, that looks fantastic, or that sounds fantastic, and I'd love to see that. And I know because I'm not in that theater tomorrow, I'm probably never going to get to see those things. Um, and maybe the power has always been in distribution with media. The distributors make the money. It's an age-old thing in film, and YouTube's democratized that, which is exciting. Um, I Confluence is on the Surf Network. They've been great. Like One California Day and Bella Vita and Single Fin Yellow have all enjoyed being on that platform because I think the people that follow it are hungry for that. And once their streaming model kicked in where it's subscription based, so minutes per title go back to the filmmaker, that makes some sense. It's still, I mean, I'm not going to say, but pennies on the minute, right? So it's the amount of hours you need to accumulate to go produce a film of any quality is shocking. And I do think that's where the trick is, and it's it, like you said, the subscription thing's interesting for these niche audiences because the wherewithal is like, hey, for this monthly service that it's the old PBS model, right?
Yes.
For this little bit of money, that's your Starbucks or fancier coffee, better yet, you get to keep us afloat, and we're all in it together. And that was the conversation we were even having at Branch of Obi-Wan. It's like, how do you get that community to understand that part of it? And I guess I'm still trying to figure out if enough surfers care. Is it such a small lane that it just doesn't kind of work at a certain level? I don't know. And I don't want to belittle the audience, but I think even back when we were doing DVDs, and that model made sense because the shops would order, and so they were driving the business. They were the brick and mortar ordering the product. You'd always hear about one friend buys it and it gets circulated amongst friends, and then until it gets lost, it gets bought again, right? It's kind of the old surf thing. Like even with surf mags, it's like you get through the one and then you give it to your friend. And so we're vagabonds on a certain level, but the landscape certainly changed. And it continues to be a journey, and I'm fascinated by it.
Well, so Confluence is, as you said, an experimental project. Let's start with what was the initial concept for the surf film itself, and then what does it require to produce the surf film in terms of time and money and all that sort
Sure.
of stuff? And then what does the distribution, what were the options and what did you land on?
Yeah, good question. And thank you. Confluence is, it's I call it an experimental film because in the past the features have been these bigger things, and this truly was a confluence of events where I was shooting, sessions with friends through the past years, and some of this footage has been up on social media in different iterations. And I was pained that, not just my stuff, but I turn on social media and I see stuff that I felt, gosh, if I was a filmmaker, I'd save that for a film, and we just kind of scroll through it. And so the idea, almost like into a playlist, was like, I want to put together these sessions in a very curated way. I'm going to do something that I've never done where there's no driving narrative, there's no interviews, there's no narration. It's image and music, and a big part of the music is that I have an old friend, Matt Donahue, who plays with Sea Poodle, San Diego band that's headed by Mikko, and he started sending me stuff. He's like, hey, we're jamming and we love your footage. And I started putting it to the footage, and we all were like, it feels right. Like that, it just felt good to us. And so that started evolving, using the footage in a few posts, which then I would see traction on. I'm like, God, I would like to see this in a longer format, very much in I'm just going to put on and chill. Like, I don't, I was even hesitant to do any marketing for it. I'm like, I just kind of want to put it out there and just let, you come home late at night, you put it on, or you get home from work and you just need a break and you're cooking dinner and maybe it's on in the background. It's not this thing that you have to focus on. And part of that came out of seeing other brands, big brands, take on documentaries, which I think is great, but then they premiere them at a bar or something, and it's like the sound's loud and I'm missing the story, and somebody's put all this work into this cool thing and the brand doesn't care because they're having a party, and that kind of pissed me off. And so the knee jerk's like, okay, I'm going to do something that fits in that sense, and I'll use my little bit of resources from 𝐿 Baffa. And 𝐿 Baffa is the wine project that came out of the friends from Bella Vita, and our marketing budget is minuscule. It's me doing kind of whatever I want. And the idea was, well, if I could use a little bit of that, and that helps them a little and helps this a little, could we put something together? So it was very, again, it was kind of playfulness. And look, it came for me at a time when, coming out of the pandemic, which was hard on a lot of people, and I went through the Disney kind of debacle, I was in a pretty bad place and just not happy about a lot of things. And so I think, if anything, it was just fun. It felt fun, and as it started evolving, it was, hey, Parker, you're in Indo for 3 months. Could we get a session from you that would fit into this? And, when you look at the list of Connor Coffin and Parker Goffin, along with maybe Chris Del Moro and Andrew Sereno and, Tyler Hatziki, it's like, wow, okay, that's a weird mix from a modern surf media standpoint, right? But for me, like, that's, you go out at a wave like Rincon, and that's what you see. You see this mix, this confluence of different interests and things. And so I kind of also want to represent that. So that's the long sort of answer of what started shaping it. And then I just kept playing with it to the point where I finally said, okay, I want to beta test this. And this may throw people off, but I was just trading emails. The band is going to evolve tracks. So depending where the live show is, it might be scored differently than someone else. It's not like I'm on this auteur thing of like, here's the score, go play it. It's, let's feel this out. And as new sessions perhaps get captured, I hope, I even intend to adjust that and let it be this fluid thing that kind of evolves into, I don't know, check in to find out. The surf network's being really cool and open, that I could update files and adjust it as time goes on. the video on demand's obviously a direct to consumer. So that those are the avenues I chose to answer your other question. I like what the Surf Network's done with my other titles, so I thought I'd give them a window. We haven't even put a time on that window, so it's a bit of an open an open door in the breeze. And VOD is interesting because, as you know, and probably any creators know, that's where you see that nice markup, but you got to get to an audience, and that's the trick there. Will I window it on YouTube and sort of see, what the world thinks of it? Maybe. I think my issue with YouTube is I've never put the energy in to get that viewership where you start seeing ad revenue. And like you said, it's a real commitment. I know my nephews Connor and Parker shot that cloud break sequence, and Nathan Florence was there doing his thing, and the guys came back to me and told me how hard he works. Like, everybody's having their post-session beer, and he's pulling clips and starting his edit and building that thing so it's up that night. And that's, for the young people thinking, oh, I can go do that, it's a workload that you got to be willing to jump into and take on. Maybe when I was 25 I could have done that. Now with a family, wife and kids, it's near impossible on that level. So that was the thinking, and it was always the hope that the band would kind of take it and play it. And I found this band is a bunch of friends who jam for fun, so they're in themselves kind of not looking to get serious about booking venues and all that. So I've sort of fallen into a bit of that tour manager role, which I can't say I love, but the feedback's been so positive from the theater owners, from even the audience on social media, that they want to go see it live and have the live experience. So September 15th will be our first one in Carpinteria, which, we'll have a little better feeling for what it is and how it goes.
The idea of editing, re-editing, or including new sessions into the project is, I didn't know that was part of this project, and that's a fascinating concept, to have this evolving art project. Do you think if you did that, you'd put like a V2 at the end of it or something, like label it slightly differently than the original version? Because over a long enough period of time, you would like to have at least a version somewhere of the original one that existed,
Sure. And I think that's fair. And that there was a conversation with a friend, and I had some trepidation about the approach. And he said, well, think of it as how bands have always held live concert. Like, you've heard the song in different iterations all these times, but you go to that show in that moment, and it is that thing and that experience, and that becomes a concert album. So I'm playing with that philosophy in it. And, is it the show we record at Carpinteria live that becomes the soundtrack with some new clips, and then it's live in Carpinteria, and that's how you label it. To be determined, because that's kind of the next iteration of where we're at. The first, I had to lay something down that the band could kind of look at, get inspired, find a groove, and then we'll go from there. But I agree, and I think the Surf Network would be willing to host V1, V2 almost as chapters or episodes. But again, it's is the audience going to get behind it early enough that you get some revenue going where you can reinvest and do that? That's a little bit of the game or the gamble. And that's the journey. So it's also kind of why I want to get out and talk about it and give people a heads up,
Yeah. It's going to take me a long time to fully process the concept of what that evolving art project would look like, but I think there's a lot there. And I think the idea of having, it's not a new version, it's not a new chapter. It has some of the old footage or the original footage in it, but there's something new edited, because the idea of people still want to watch Friends instead of the new content, you can incorporate that into it. They get the original edit, but plus a refreshing of it somehow, I think is very, very interesting. And again, I haven't wrapped my brain fully around it quite yet, but I think there is something there for sure that you could work with.
Well, I'm glad to hear it resonates. It's, you know, it's a tricky monkey, as we say, because everybody likes something different, right? You'll show it to one person and their favorite sequence is one thing and somebody else loves something else. And so as soon as you start tweaking it, you know you're gonna ruffle feathers perhaps. But if there's a version still available, you know, like you'll always hear, oh, that Dead album live at whatever, right? Or that Zeppelin album, that's the one for me, then that's kind of a fun way to play with it.
You know what it could be is the live screenings are the ones that are ever evolving, that have new fresh footage, and that's the reason to go to the live screening. But Confluence, the film, exists on the internet as the original.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you're not far off, because that's sort of what that was my first pitch to the surfers. And we'll see, you know, because it's a team endeavor. I think surfers, at least in my experience, are like, oh, I got that part, you know, that's, you go run with that, I'm gonna go on to the next thing. um but yeah, that would make the live events that much more special for sure. um because then you're going, and the fun part of that too is you could play to the local crowd and evolve it. You know, maybe it's the session in San Diego,
Yeah.
Dane's part gets explored longer. We do a trip, do something neat. Um, Obviously up here, Connor and Parker are, you know, hometown heroes. So it's um it's more work, I guess, on a
It
certain
is.
level.
Well, it's a totally different project. I mean, now you are spending time on the road, tour, like you said, tour managing,
Yeah.
like it's kind of a different thing.
Yeah.
But
But I got the email this morning from TGR, Teton Gravity Group, who did some surf stuff, but, you know, really known for ski. And every year, just like Warren Miller, there's that kickoff film, and they have huge sponsors. And, you know, part of the reason I love podcasts is maybe there's someone smarter than me listening and will email us with their take on it. But it's, why doesn't surfing have that? You know, how could we curate it? And a ski season certainly kind of opens the doors and allows for an event like that. But, you know, there's the winter season kickoff for a lot of areas. What could you do that becomes sort of this thing that once a year, and that the evolution sort of trends into that? It's like, well, here we've evolved this thing, and here's the year looking back.
yeah.
There's a lot of ways. There's a lot of ways to skin a cat. I read Rick Rubin's The Creative Act. Have you read that book?
You know what's funny? I saw it on your Instagram and I added it on my Amazon Christmas Christmas wish list. I'm not in a rush to get it, so I figured somebody else can get it for me for
Yeah,
Christmas.
duly noted. I've been trying to get on that, but
Thank
yeah,
you.
well, it was given to me, so I should pay it forward. And kind of while I was flushing through this, and it speaks a lot about the creative process and kind of getting in that space of play, you know, which is something we've discussed with these old filmmakers on this project we've been working on. And kind of, when you're a kid, and that's what you do, it's like all play. And then as these things become careers, that gets sort of sucked away. And, you know, what is that essence of play that makes great stuff? And it doesn't mean it has to be easy, you know, for many creative things, whether it be music or filmmaking or whatever. You hear of conflict and how that can also create something great through the collaboration.
Yeah.
Um, and so I think it's just being open to that process, and kind of always willing to discover where it's going to go. Um, and
Well,
for me, knowing that the surf model so well and the type of film I like to make, it seemed like a fun time to explore other parts of it, you know?
I think there is something to that uh that fits actually with this modern moment that we're at in surf media, where you really can't afford to do projects like this. So what you need is a day job. And
Yeah.
then you just dally in the passion project. And you can treat it like a child's play at that point because there's a lot less pressure on it. There's no, paying your mortgage isn't attached to the success of this project. I think it's kind of a good time in surfing in that respect. So even for professional surfers, I've thought about this where, before the market crashed and there was just tons of professional surfers getting paid lots of money just to free surf. That was great for what it was, but it's almost better now where they have day jobs. There have Surfing's become less homogenized. There's more interesting characters who are doing it for the purity of it, that are going to do it they're going to do it no matter what.
Yeah.
Chris Christensen even told me like that's part of his criteria for picking team riders is they have to have a day job because he doesn't want them solely surfing. They develop more interest by having, the challenges of the real world. And so whether it's a surf photographer who has a day job or a filmmaker or whatever, it almost, I think, gives you more creative freedom in a way to then go do the art project.
Yeah, this is very true. I got to figure out a good day job as
Well, you could
Hollywood
make,
keeps
my point is
imploding.
you could make films for Star Wars museums,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
make a
Well, and
living
that's
that
what
way.
that is part of it. It is part
So
of it.
what, speaking of which, you referenced a Disney debacle. Can you give us that story?
Yeah, last time you and I chatted, Chasing Waves, I think, was just about to go on platform or near it. And for those who don't know, Chasing Waves, I kind of lucked into it through a good friend, Chris Cowan, who's a very established TV producer who I actually grew up with. And he said, "Hey, I've been talking to Disney. They want to do something about Japan. And I've been pitching all these ideas. And somehow surfing came up and they know your films and love them. Would you ever want to do something?" And I think I was mid-pandemic. I was probably in my underwear trying to figure out where life was going. And I said, "Sure, Disney, I'll talk." And then kind of step back and go, "Oh, wow. Like that Disney brand label and kind of the core surf thing that I've been such a part of don't totally gel. Like, how am I going to manage this?" And we developed something that had to do, Tokyo Olympics were that year. So that was a big thing they wanted to look at. And we jumped into it. And then the pandemic carried on. And so our whole game plan of me going to Japan for 100 days and making something got thrown out, and it became something else, which was a great learning experience. And I was very proud of what we were able to accomplish, even with the challenges. That said, right around when Disney put it on platform, they sat on it for 6 months. We had delivered, but Australia wanted it to be a summer release. They were a big part of our program because of the Pacific Rim. And they sat on it and launched in early, I guess it was 2022, I think. And within 2 months, the New York Times listed as one of the best things to watch on platform, which I was so excited about. The marketing didn't happen that we had talked about. They weren't doing buys on Surfline or during a WSL contest. I'm like, "You guys, this is easy with your resources." And then Bob Iger, who was brought in to clean up Disney, cut 150 shows off the platform. So when I say shows, that's including all the episodes, right? So you're talking about probably thousands of actual hours of programming. And the decision there was to save money, in the books. It's a line item. If it's not on the platform, they take it as a loss. And we fell into that. So I didn't even know it had happened. One of the athletes, Sarah Kurogi, who I think maybe you ended up talking to, but she texted me and she's like, "It's not on platform. What's going on?" And I started fishing around and contacted my agents and discovered that it was just a clean swipe. And actually, the guy I'm working on this other project with, he had a series on there called Prop Culture, which was great. And they would look at movie props and the history of where the prop came from. They also got cut. And we were saying how in this modern age of creating content for streaming, none of us had ever even thought that at a certain point, someone with the wave of a pen would just make it disappear. And I've, by choice spent my creative life making things that I hope can be around on some level. It's why I haven't done a lot of TV, and the commercials come and go, and that's always been a little bittersweet for me. But they pay well, so you love them when they happen, and especially if it's a brand you believe in. And so to have this thing just go away before it ever even really, in my opinion, got a chance, you know. And I get with content whether surfers would have loved it or not, who knows? But I did feel there was an interesting insight into surf culture in that series that I was so excited to share with people, because I really pushed sort of my comfort zone on how far we dug into certain themes and stories, the tsunami being a big one. That was episode 5, and I really felt that that was one of the best things I've ever been a part of. You know, seeing the shop owner come back from the devastation of the tsunami, be told he shouldn't be on the beach or go in the water because of, you know, the radiation, and saying, this is important because I'm a surfer and we need to rebuild the community from the surf culture up. I get chicken skin thinking about it now. And so to just have that go away it was definitely a kick in the gut, to say the least. It was a kick in the balls, really. But you know, that's life. I got paid. I shouldn't complain, and you move
Well,
on.
that's what I'm confused about is Disney already paid for it. When you said they just cross out the line item because it saves them money, where does it save them money if it was already paid for and on the platform?
You know, my understanding is when it's not on platform and if it's been shelved on some, you know, annotation, then it can be taken as a loss in the books. Um,
Oh, I see.
whether that means it could, you know, on a different tax year be brought back, I don't know. You know, there's a famous story, I don't know if you heard it, but they did, I believe it was Catwoman was produced, and a big movie, not necessarily Disney, I think maybe Warner Brothers, and it was essentially finished. And before release, they decided that they didn't think it was good enough. And what people may not understand is, you produce a movie, say it's a $50 million movie, they're usually going to spend another 50 million, like 1-to-1 in the P&A advertising. So that's a huge investment. And they looked at whatever had been made for whatever amount of money and said, you know what, kill it. It's better if we just take the loss and it never sees the light of day. And on a big project like that, there's a lot, you know, and even we had on the Disney, if there had been a season 2 or season 3, I was really like, oh, this is going to be cool. You know, I'm
Mm-hmm.
providing for my family finally. And you know, on a movie like that, it's the same. The actors, the directors, they're all built-in royalties. So when they do that, you're getting cut off at the head.
Right.
Um, and you know, the trades, anyone who follows that, there's been a little bit of that in recent years, and it's fascinating. You know, it's, I think if anything, it's as hard to go through when you realize that the suits, the people pulling the strings at the top, you're really just a line item in a big book. And I guess I shouldn't be surprised when you think of the massive, you know, I
Yeah.
mean, you're talking about a company that owns Lucasfilm and Marvel and all these theme parks, and you know, it goes on and on and on. Our little show, as big as it was in my life, is a very small thing in that ecosphere. Um, so it was hard, you know, and I feel the worst for the surfers because they don't get paid to be on a show like that. They give their
Yeah.
time, they open up about their lives. And I feel bad for the people who worked really hard to make it good, because a lot of people did. But
I I think it will be back. I know nothing about this space, but I agree with you. If it's they own the the project itself, they
yeah,
own it. They didn't delete it. You know what I mean? They just found a way. He needed to clean up the books in that year, it seems. He
yeah,
found out a way to do that, and they can reactivate it at some point. I would think it would be back.
you would, you know, it,
We'll see.
we'll see. I mean, it's fascinating. It's like, why not have it on iTunes, where if someone wants it, they could download it, and you know,
Yeah.
you guys could make money off of it. But
Yeah.
it's again, that's why I don't run a studio. I'm not that type of brain. I like making stuff, not managing it. Uh,
I
so
know. And it goes back though to what my initial thought was, or that I shared with you, is I'm just concerned the audience can't find it. Like, you're creating content. I hate when it gets lost, when it's either the connection can't be. I know there's listeners who want to see that 𝐂𝐚𝐬𝐽𝐬 series. And it just bums me out when it's like the content is there, the audience is there, they want it, and never the tween shall meet. And so that's why Confluence makes a lot of sense, where it's like, you know what? VOD, it's there available. If somebody wants to pay the $6
yeah,
or buy the subscription to the Surf Network on Amazon, they can do that and they have access to it. But through that model, it generally doesn't generate enough revenue to allocate towards proper marketing to ensure that the audience who wants to see it knows that it exists and can find it, you know?
yeah, yeah. That's
That's
the
the,
double-edged sword.
yeah.
And I, maybe there'll be an answer. I know Taylor, I think just a bunch of his films went to Red Bull, who does have the money, right, to post stuff. Bella Vita has been on Red Bull TV. That license is almost up. But it would be interesting if a group of us and the Surf Network, Ira Opera did it. If you look at the base of the Surf Network, it's his old shows and that old, footage. Um, is there a modern, I hate to use that term, but is there a version of that maybe that a few filmmakers get together and do? I don't know. Perhaps.
Yeah.
Um, there's power obviously in the collective. And if you can streamline that, you know, maybe that's the goal. But um everything costs money. As I look at all the subscriptions I have, and it's overwhelming.
I know.
And then, from software that I use to edit all the way down to the stuff I want to support and love. So I get where people are at. It's like, oh God, you want me to open up my checkbook again?
Yeah.
It's that part's tricky.
So one of our ongoing sponsors we've had for a couple of months is Rocket Money. And are you familiar with that?
I am. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So it'll find subscriptions
Yeah.
that you don't even know exist, and it'll like let you know. Or maybe you and your wife have this, you both have a Hulu subscription, you didn't realize you both had it. It'll identify that stuff for you. Anyways, we started advertising for them, and within a month or two I got an email from a listener who had a paid subscription through us from their Rocket Money app that they had just set up, canceling their subscription with Surf Splendor. Because it was like they had forgotten that they had a subscription with us apparently, and then they ran
Yeah.
it through Rocket Money and they're like, I don't listen to that anymore, and so they canceled it. I was like, man, my own advertiser's now working against me.
Yeah,
But
the algorithms are dangerous, I
I know
guess.
it was,
I
it
was
was
blown away. I yeah, putting stuff up on YouTube, even like Single Fin Yellow, I wanted to put up, and it gets kicked back because of the music licensing, and then you got to go through all the paperwork, and it's like, oh, that was all analog. Where is it? And it becomes this thing. So it's amazing how quickly the computers are tracking with us and ahead of us.
um
Um,
I want a couple of things about Confluence before we get too far off that track. I did love the music. Um
cool.
yeah, loved
They're
the
good.
score.
And it's exciting, and yeah, it was fun for me because they were just literally dumping tracks on me, and like, here we recorded this, and here's another version of the same song at a different venue, and each, because they're truly jamming and going with what the audience is giving them, would have these different cues and different sections. And so I really had fun putting it up and playing with what felt akin to each sequence, and sort of seeing that evolve. And that's also, I think, again, why it could be interesting is new sequences get captured to be like, oh, that would really track well with that track, or a new track that we haven't heard yet. So it's again, it's meant to be playful, and I invite the audience to kind of jump along and join in, and send comments or whatever to what you loved or what you hated. Even, it's all it's all feedback. I joke often. I treat the work preciously in the past, and I wish I didn't care, but I do care. And yet now that I'm a parent, and you have kids over, and one kid doesn't like cheese pizza, and you're like, who doesn't like cheese pizza? But you're just reminded that everybody likes different things, and
Hmm.
and that's one of the great parts of life. And if you want to be a creator, it's connecting with the people that like what you offer, and trying to track the global taste is mind-boggling, and not
Yeah.
that fun. It's better to go do something you like and find those people who agree with it, I guess.
Let them find it. Yeah. Um, I have something I want to read to you that I think you'll find entertaining.
Okay.
This was an email that came through from a listener years ago, believe it or not, but it directly relates to you and one of your featured surfers. He said, while growing up, my dad always told me a good surfer can ride anything at any time. In my youth, I interpreted this as trying to make a 5'5" potato chip work in knee-high wind slop here in San Diego. However, one day I witnessed true mastery of an untraditional surf craft in a Pacific Northwest beach break, which changed my perspective on what good surfing is and should be. Sure, I had seen classic surf movies where non-shortboarders were the main feature. The Endless Summer 2, 1 and 2, The Seedling, One California Day, etc. However, I never put much thought into pursuing that style of surfing until this day. When I was in eighth grade, my mom and I went up to the Pacific Northwest for a wedding where our old neighbor was getting married to his longtime girlfriend. I was 14 years old and just getting my first taste of surf addiction. At the time, I was kind of pissed to be going to this wedding because the waves were going to be good at home in Southern California. But I was a good sport. My mom was officiating the wedding, and I wanted to support our friends. So we went to the Pacific Northwest and headed out to the beach where the wedding will be held and where the rehearsal would be taking place. As I'm walking up these sand dunes with my mom, I got my first feeling of how cold the beach can actually be outside of my Southern California bubble. It was autumn, the waves were howling offshore, the sun was out, but it did not provide much warmth. I zipped up my jacket, put on my beanie, and asked my mom if I could go watch the surf to kill some time before the rehearsal started. After some negotiations, she agreed, and I charged up the sand dunes to get a glimpse of what the Pacific Northwest surf looked like. I get to the top of the dunes, look out to sea, and it's 10 to 15 feet. Huge, massive, unruly beach breaks with A-frames being blown into beautiful teepees by the offshore wind. I scan the lineup to see if there are any madmen brave enough to charge these massive waves. And sure enough, a little dot of a surfer is out, dropping in on a 15-foot cavern and getting blown out. Whoa. I watched this surfer, mesmerized and hooting on every pit packed for about an hour, getting blown out of these massive beach break barrels all by themselves. Drop in, get super barreled, get blown out, get washed by mountains of white water, make it out, drop in again over and over. I was psyched out of my mind seeing someone score heavy tubes with no one around. Truly a surfer's dream. After an hour and a dozen or so deep sandy tubes, the mystery surfer gets out of the water and starts walking up the beach where the wedding rehearsal is taking place. As he gets closer, the bride to be goes down, hugs the surfer, brings him to all of us, in which she introduces him as her older brother. As he made his rounds of introductions and good to see yous with everybody at the rehearsal, he comes up to me and I realize, holy shit, it's Dane Perlee from One California Day. The guy rips and he shapes with the Knoll family. What should I do? Am I supposed to bow? Is there a ring I'm supposed to kiss? Is this real? I avoided making a fool of myself and instead sheepishly asked him the only question my 14-year-old brain could come up with. How was it out there? He smiles, shakes my hand, and whips his board around and shows the bottom. Dane replies, it was pretty fun out there. I got a couple fun tubes, a couple poundings, but I've been nursing this knee injury, so I've been knee boarding on this funky board that I made. Upon closer inspection, I kid you not, this board did not look like a traditional Alaya with sleek wood finishing and well-placed concaves, despite Dane's ability as an expert shaper. Instead, it was a square nosed, dense, looked like a piece of plywood whittled down to resemble some sort of surf craft. And yet, he was not only packing 10 to 15-foot tubes and flying out of them with ease, he was also paddling back out through a minefield of exploding waves that were churning up sand. Any of these waves that he caught would still have been the wave of my life. Now I'm 27 and I've seen plenty of pro surfers in the wild. I've seen pros packing tubes at pipe. I've seen Brazilians doing flips at trestles. I've seen guys raving massive 𝐿𝐴𝐻𝐿𝐼, but nothing has come close to the true mastery I witnessed the day of Dane packing mammoth Pacific Northwest barrels while kneeboarding in Alaya with no cameras, no peanut gallery, no one else around but me and a wedding party to appreciate the show. Just a guy doing what he loves and embodying my dad's definition of being able to surf anytime, on anything at any time. I'm back in San Diego now, and I see Dane around sometimes as he lives down here too with his amazing wife and kids. He'll always say hi and make small talk whenever we cross paths. He has he even wrote a board that I made with my dad and gave me some tips on how to make it better. I haven't told him how impressionable that day was on me, but I'm still starstruck every time I get to shake his hand.
That's phenomenal. Wow. Love it. It's well written too. Yeah, might have a career in journalism.
I Yeah, that like I said, that email came through years ago, and I believe it was James in San Diego deserves the credit on that one.
Well done, James. And I agree with every word of it. You know, Dane's amazing. I mean, he's a great person. I feel so I'm very blessed that everybody I've gotten to work with is great. Dane and I really hit it off, and I met him through my cousin Andrew, who kind of got me interested in surfing when I was really little. And I would go down, at least of the people who've been in my films, I would say Dane is probably the most underdocumented, underrated charger per that story. Um, and we touched on a little bit in One California Day. That was him. I wasn't baiting him to go surf sharky stuff alone. That he just does that stuff. And I think having his Washington pedigree and then the time in Santa Cruz and surfing north of Santa Cruz, he just likes it. He likes to get away from people. I know you've spent a little time with him recently. I think there's a lot of really good surfing, and I've seen a bit of it going on in San Diego right now that can't be captured as well because he surfs in areas that you just still play by those rules, right? There's like
Yeah.
no leashes and no cameras, and that's it. And that's tricky because I think from someone who builds boards and you got to work on that marketing end, I guess a certain person would say, well, you need to be getting in front of the camera, but Dane's done it his way, and I really commend him. And he has a great following because he makes really kind of cool, sometimes out there, bitching stuff. Um, in Confluence, he surfs with Corey Colapinto, and both those guys, I really wanted to get them in good surf, and it didn't work out. And that's one of those sessions where, if there's a V2, I would love to build on it because they're both writing unique stuff and just make it look so easy and in waves that are just everyday waves. And I kind of, I know in a surf movie there's a certain, well, it should all be epic and all time, but I thought a lot about a film that you'll remember and younger audiences might not, but Adrift that Jay Brother made with Joel. And granted, you had Joel and the smoothness of Joel, but a lot of those sessions were just everyday waves. And I loved that film because it was just, it was so relatable of like, that's what I surf. Look at what he's doing. I want to figure out how to do that. And I look at what Dane can do on the same day that I paddle out. It is, his footwork is so in tune. He's got his equipment so in tune with what he wants and needs and feels. He's the only person I see riding a single fin longboard with two little spud fins just in front of the skeg, not side bites. Just always thinking outside of the box. And per that story, backs it up with huge balls
I know.
and great ability.
So I saw Dane a couple weeks ago in his shaping bay at Bird Surf Shed, and I see him on Instagram and I see the boards that he's building on Instagram. So for listeners who don't know Dane Perlee or what he does, Osprey Surfboards is his surfboard label. He's a surfboard shaper. So you can follow him on Instagram, Osprey Surfboards. I see those boards on Instagram and they look different, but you cannot fully appreciate how unique those boards are unless you're in the shaping bay or just get to see it physically and get to feel it physically. In the shaping bay, it helps even more because you look at the board from a certain angle and you see certain contours. But if you lift the tail and that angle kind of shifts in front of your eye, you see all of these different contours develop in your eye, in your sight line of sight. And it's like it's doing one thing in the nose and then something totally different in the middle and something opposite in the back. And it's not just a concave, it's the way that concave fades into the rail and the way that the rail apexes at that moment. It is wild. And I know a lot of boards have a lot of sophistication, like I'm talking about, but the concert of these particular variables in his boards, I have never seen done in that way. They are totally distinct and different than anybody else's boards I've ever seen. And I told him that, and he's like, "Yeah, I know. I'm on my own program, And I'm like, "Well, he's obviously such a good surfer that he's shaping to his surfing goals." But I was like, "What are you trying to achieve with this particular longboard design?" And he's like, "Everything." I'm like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "You want to go fast? You want to turn? You want to nose ride? You want to be able to do this? You want to be a barrel ride? Like this is going to do all of it." I'm like, "I didn't know you could do all of it in one board." He's like, "Yeah, why couldn't you?" I'm like, "Well, okay."
The magic bullet. It's fun. It's really, for such a humble kind of, low key guy, the way he's willing to push and explore and, and not with a ton of pageantry, right? He just does this and he's back ordered for years, as he said, it's because it's hand shaped. I mean, it's a laborious thing, and he puts a lot of focus and attention to detail into it. I The trip we did to visit Greg Knoll and Jed making One California Day Goes Down is one of the great experiences of my life. It was also one of those lessons learned is what happens making the movie is almost more entertaining sometimes than what the movie is itself,
Yeah.
because Greg was just such a figure, as we know, and a presence. But, for us, these young kids coming up with our old little Bolex camera, and we showed up late and he's in bed and just this, "Oh, you guys are here. You ready to get in trouble?" And next thing that we know, he has us in the river about to die at daybreak, and toting this raccoon around that he had caught. It was just marvelous. So I I'm glad Dane is continuing to do well, and I want to shoot more with him. I think that's the hardest part about all of this is you hope you can figure out a way to get to do more of it. We're all kind of living that surf vagabond lifestyle, but it's just so fun, and I really love capturing these guys doing what they love to do. And you know if the audience is on board and we can continue to figure out ways to make it work, and if not, we'll figure out how to get the brands to come up with more money. Billabong's releasing a big film right now. It's been a while since that's happened, and it looks amazing. I think
What film is that?
the trilogy, the new
Oh, yeah.
trilogy series.
Yeah.
I think they have a more classic distribution behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Australia has that drive. So much of it is around the coast. I think surf culture is just, it's on the news. It's more embedded in the fabric of sports than it is here. And so the brands echo that. And I think projects maybe get support because of that as well on a certain level. That's really cool.
Yeah.
We'll see if the industry can kind of refine itself on other levels. But longboarding will always be the subculture within the subculture, I think, as we move forward. Although, I was listening to your chat with Devin, and the mid-length thing is kind of redefined certain, models for what's popular, and so it's always changing and evolving, and
Yeah.
I
Well,
guess it's our job as media people to keep listening, and
was that your first time working or shooting with Corey Colapinto?
I shot a little bit with Corey for the Pilgrim project that 𝐂𝐚𝐿 did. He asked me to come down, and that's when I got to hang out with Corey. I got to know him, and this was the first time I called him up and said, "Let's go do something." And he was so on board. It was fun, and I mean his ability. It doesn't even translate when you look at the footage. When you see those boards up close, and then what he's able to do, it blows my mind. Um, he is just a freak, and I think that was Dane's quote unquote. Corey's a freak, and but such a nice guy. Really, obviously, there's a good pedigree of surf ability in the Colapinto family lineage.
Yeah.
And I've gotten to hang out with Griff and Crosby a little bit through my nephews, so it's fun to get to know all of them on a small level.
Yeah, it was great to see Corey in the film, and it made sense that he and Dane would have a mutual interest in one another because, like I said, Dane's unbelievable talent and the boards that he's building for his surfing. Corey is very much doing the same thing, totally different than Dane, but the same thing for his own surfing, and he's equally as talented on the surfboard too.
Yeah,
So when you talk about like longboarding will always be the subculture within the subculture, yes, but they're doing it totally different than anybody's ever done it, and
yeah.
and that could just catch fire too, and it could become huge. So I don't know. I really like both their surfing.
Or is there an Osprey board in your future?
Dude, I got too many. I would
Yeah, I
love
know.
to have one. I would love
Yeah,
to have one, and I hang out with so many surfboard shapers that I want to buy one from everybody. I just can't.
yeah, I know. I
Yeah.
have a similar problem. My
And
wife won't allow me.
well, my wife doesn't know the worst of it, to be honest with you. But I say exactly that. I can't. And then tomorrow I find myself with somebody and I'm like,
Yeah,
all right, let me get one of those too.
yeah, I gotta do that. I gotta do that. I need to get one of Dane's. We're working on that. That'll
Okay,
be
good,
hopefully not too far in the future. But
good.
it's cool. It's a great I think a window into the possibilities of why keep any of it in a box on a certain level. It's meant to be fun, and sometimes we all get a little too serious about anything we're very into, and so I really commend guys like Corey and Dane who are willing to play and just keep it wide open.
Me
You
too.
know?
Yeah. They're doing exactly what we were talking about at the beginning of this conversation, which is cater exactly to their core. They're like, we know what we're passionate about or the way that we like to perform and the way that we like to do
Yeah,
something. There's no reason for me to try to go shape a pointy thruster and
yeah,
compete with everybody out there. He's like, I'm great at this. Let me just focus on this. And I don't know about Corey's board orders, but to Dane, like he's found that core and they're going to support him. And he could charge a certain dollar amount that allows him to do a small volume of boards and still make a living. And that's what he should be doing.
yeah, yeah.
It's what we all
Well,
should be
it's
doing.
yeah, exactly. And I was going to ask you kind of at the beginning, we were talking about podcasting, like, what do you tell the young person? And I think we've sort of now hit on it, whether they're interested in any of these things, right? Because on paper, none of them maybe are home runs, but if it's all viable, if you put the work in and kind of learn the craft and then find that focused group that's interested in that thing. In today's day and age, we are very laser targeted across the board. Uh,
Totally. Well,
what?
the additional advice I would give if somebody did ask me that relates to what you were talking about earlier, with the Marvel or maybe Catwoman being 50 million bucks and then needing another 50 mil is the content creation is what I love. Having this conversation is what I enjoy. This is the smallest bit of the work.
Hmm.
All the other the vast majority, the 90% is prepping for a particular show and then publishing, distributing, posting on Instagram that we published the show, engaging with all those DMs that come through on Instagram, invoicing advertisers, paying co-hosts, like all of the accounting, all of that stuff is 90% of it. The creating the content, that's the actual fun part, is the smallest part of it.
Yeah. Painful reality.
But you want to know that, honestly, like if you're going to get into it, you should know that because you need to allocate time to those things,
100%. No, I mean, even making our original films, when I've raised money, I never raised marketing money. And that's would be one of my first words of advice. If you're going to make an independent film or do any independent project, allocate a certain amount of that budget, especially if you're doing a fundraising thing, to how you get it out.
Yeah.
There's a lot of noise every day that we know we're all bombarded with. So when you're trying to cut through that noise, you gotta utilize certain resources, and it's nice to have a little budget to do it. And I think strategic partnerships, finding that person, whether it's a producer for, something like a podcast or a film, who maybe enjoys more the numbers game or the relationships game, and you just want to create, like, that's also key. And not always easy, it's kind of, there's relationships that work great on certain things, and then those people maybe break up and you're on to the next thing, and so it's finding that. But for a young person, I think it is good to know. I heard something fascinating. It was a film teacher, maybe USC, who I was asking him, I said, what what is it like seeing these new kids come in who grow up with, they can literally make a phone on a film on a phone, and all this technology and iMovie, this stuff that I never had. And he said the ability is off the chart. They understand filmmaking. They have access to behind the scenes stuff that other generations didn't. The ability to collaborate is close to zero. And as I've learned, Confluence is more of a one-man show, but any big project, you need to be able to collaborate and convey vision and on a certain level manage. And I do think, that's the other bit of advice I'd at least give to a young filmmaker. Learn how to put a team together and find people you love working with, and and grow that part of your repertoire, because it's important.
That's fascinating.
Um,
that'll give you a distinct point of separation too in the marketplace if you could develop that skill.
Yeah, we're in a very me society. I see it raising my kids, and it doesn't always. That's not what makes it all work.
No, definitely.
We're in trouble if we all keep trucking ahead thinking that. But
I'm curious are there any other surf films that you've seen recently that you're psyched about, or surf filmmakers who you're always looking forward to their next project?
Yeah, I mean, I really love, some of the stuff Torn's been doing, the Neat Essential stuff, that vibe that they've created, I think is awesome. And I've watched a few of those, and I think I'm because I'm old school. I'm actually excited. I know the Malloys have been working on. I see the book over your shoulder. The new scan, I think a 4K scan of Thicker Than Water, and a re-release of that project. And so I'm as equally excited about that and kind of their plan. I hope to tour it. I don't know. But that's an interesting thing. I put that on social media. I said, would you rather I scan Single Fin Yellow to 4K so that it could be up on iTunes, or take those resources and try to do something else? And it was almost 95% go do something new. So that was another little Confluence kind of kick in the the groin, to like, all right, well, let's play around with what that could look like. I would love to go spend 2 years and shoot all new crazy stuff, but it's just there's a reality to that I was able to pull off younger in life that's harder. So I look at some of these younger guys who have figured out a way, to work with a brand and have a small footprint, but yet create something that feels big and the breadth. Ben Weiland, I think, has the Searching for Volcanoes. I'm blowing the title. That's not fair to them, but a new project. He's a super talented filmmaker that has come up through some brand stuff, I think, and found his voice, but is now um, starting to do some kind of bigger projects. And I'm a fan of his work. I wanted him to work on Chasing Waves. So yeah, those are a couple things. It's
Interesting. Sorry to interrupt if you had another thought there, but talking about the Malloy brothers, interesting to see Keith's work with Kai Lenny.
yeah, yeah.
I mean, I wouldn't have seen that. I mean, I'm thrilled that Keith has that opportunity, and he's really seems like benefited the project a tremendous amount. I just wouldn't have anticipated that partnership coming, and it's great. It's great for both of them.
Yeah, I think it's they're good friends, and even their producer Brett, his kids go to school with my kids, and so I get to see them quite a bit. And I think there was an opportunity there, and the beauty of a Keith or a Chris or Dan, when they do a project and they show up and they put someone on camera, they instantly, that person knows that they've been in those shoes, and have charged on that level, and have also done the in front of the camera and understand the complexities and the nuance of what that is. And so I think it creates these wonderful things when you have a young guy like Kai, who's obviously got ability beyond kind of comprehension on a certain level, but he's got a Keith Malloy who's, Keith has cut his teeth and has proved that on all levels, including as a filmmaker. And I think that then, any documentary, there's got to be some trust between participant and creator or filmmaker. And I think Keith shows up and he has that, and I think that's really helped that world of what they've done. And I know they've had fun making it, which is also I think that shows. Whether or not even the fun ends up in the edit, you just sort of feel it as a viewer. And Kai went through the injury, and there was some drama there that as a storyteller they didn't plan. Um, but it does make it better, right? The adversity and overcoming things. And Kai's a new father, and Keith's gone through that. So it's it's cool. And I don't drink Red Bull. I've said it before, but God bless them. They have the resources to support these things, and I've benefited from that. And it's it is maybe the way of our future, that these bigger brands that will, and hopefully a lot of good stuff keeps getting made.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Yeah, I agree. I don't drink Red Bull either, but I am a fan of so much of what they do. I'm a fan of the media house. Yeah.
Yeah. That is the better compliment. And the media house guys, there are some people who came from bootstrapping independent films, and a love for this stuff. And so as big and slick as certain things become, I think the roots are always at that foundation. And that's why I think projects like Keith working with Kai get to happen, and we're all we're lucky for it, as the audience.
Totally. Kind of unrelated, but I watched 2 surf films this week on the big screen TV. One of them was Confluence. The other one, I'm curious if you've seen a trailer for it. It's called The Greatest Surf Movie in the Universe.
No, you're gonna have to send me this.
It's unbelievable, dude. It could not have been more polar opposite than Confluence. Do you know?
Well, I mean, it's because it's the greatest. I wasn't trying to make the greatest. I just wanted to put something together.
Exactly. Do you know who Vaughn Blakey is?
I don't know.
So Vaughn Blakey made Free Scrubber, the Tom Curran film. He's the brother of Ronnie Blakey. Ronnie Blakey does the WSL commentary.
Yeah.
And Vaughn's done a lot of projects with Rip Curl over the years, and So the filmer is named Nick Paulette, and he used
Okay.
to travel around with Maddie Wilkinson back in the
Yeah.
day. They did a vlog together and a blog. So it's Nick Paulette and Vaughn Blakey wrote the script, and then Vaughn directed. But they've got Luke Hemsworth is narrating it. They've got some major Australian actors involved, but it's a satire. It's a fully scripted 90-minute
Uh,
film satire, almost modeled after Team America.
ooh.
So it's animated.
Is
It's mostly animated, partially animated, but mostly animated.
gonna go
And
watch this right as soon as I hang up here.
it's crazy town. It's believe it or not, even more crass than Team America was. Um, and in that it's Australian, so it's just kind of more crass by nature. But the concept of the film is that it's the year is like 2035, and there's a virus, and some evil doctor creates a vaccine for the virus. The only side effect of the vaccine is that it completely erases all memory of surfing. So surfing doesn't exist anymore. So there's perfect waves peeling around the planet with no surfing. And Huey, the god of the ocean, um, wants people to ride the waves. So he finds Mick Fanning, who's like doing yoga somewhere now and has a wholly different life. And he employs Mick, touches Mick Fanning on the forehead, turns Mick Fanning back onto surfing. And Mick Fanning's on a mission to go find 6 other surfers to create the greatest surf movie in the universe and then bring surfing back to the world. So it's this vision quest of Mick finding Mason Ho, Griffin Colapinto, Craig Anderson, all animated, all kind of a knockoff on Team America, getting into battles and skirmishes and all this kind of stuff, going on an acid trip, you know. And then once they reconnect with a surfer and they unlock surfing for him, that's the segment of the surfer. And you get to watch a little bit of surfing.
Gold. I'm sold.
It's insane, dude.
I don't even need the surfing. It's I've been speaking to people. One of the people we interviewed recently is a guy named William Phelps. Sometimes goes by Bill. I'll test your surf media knowledge. Does it
Doesn't
ring a
ring a bell.
bell?
No.
Very few people get the light bulb, but Bill Phelps directed North Shore.
Oh my gosh.
And he's 80 something now. Smart, a real artist when he was a young guy. He actually was in New York and in Warhol's group and played around with that and experimental film, and came out to the West Coast and became buddies with a guy named Randall Kleiser. Randall Kleiser directed Grease, and they, I think, had a house on the North Shore and kind of had the opportunity with Bill, like, God, this surf scene's really cool. There's all these gorgeous tan people running around and girls. You should come over with a videotape camera and just kind of see what you find. And so he went over as this guy who really knew nothing about surfing and started doing some just videos that they then took to Universal and devised a story arc and pitched North Shore, and they, bought it on the spot. So next to the project you just pitched me, I have often felt, and I've discussed with friends, it's time for another, funny, satire surf epic from the scripted angle. And I'm really glad those guys went off and made something. And I just rewatched Team America, and that's when I almost pissed my pants during the first scene.
I know. I know. When you said time to make another satire, was North Shore meant to be satire?
Well, that's a good question. I think in their mind, probably not. But they were approaching the culture, I think, from a slightly tongue-in-cheek angle, yes.
Yeah.
But I think the jokes that have carried on that we've seen for years and years as being funny probably were things that they were not expecting to tap into the culture that way, right?
Totally. Yeah, completely. Um, Are there any other us outside of surfing, just in terms of Hollywood film? Is there anything that you're super excited about right now or that you've seen recently?
Uh, the most recent thing, I'm a little behind. I mean, I felt, sequels always scare me. I thought the sequel to Dune was gorgeous and I really enjoyed it. I just watched, which I was behind on, but Furiosa. I'm a big Miller fan. It's so visual and just kind of conceptually that I know with Fury Road, and I'm not sure on this one that it was not even ever really in print. It was always a series of storyboards, almost graphic novel-esque that the film crew would look at, the stunt crew would look at, and they'd go out and shoot. So I find that type of approach really inspiring, and that the fact that he's able to do it on this scale, and convince big studios to give him money to run around in the Australian desert. I another Hemsworth project who I know is a surfer, and I'm a fan of Hemsworth, and he plays a bit of a caricature of a bad guy and all that. Good or for bad, it was a fun watch. Um, and I want to see, I have to go see Deadpool. I want to go see it in the theater. I've just been trying to carve out time, but anything that can move the needle on that scale. For those who don't know, it's the highest grossing film in R-rated history, and it's a Disney film. So even that, I read a really interesting article about the marketing approach and kind of that idea that you had these people who were coming from Marvel dealing with Disney saying, all right, we're going to do these things, and Disney was on board with it. They got it, and it's obviously paid off. And I think anytime people are going to the movie theaters, it's a good thing. I was sad. That Santa Barbara, there's a little Santa Barbara Surf Film Festival that I try to go to, and they premiered some stuff. I got to see Mark Jeremias, my longtime collaborators, edit of the Taiwan experiments 10 years after they did it. But I was saddened that there wasn't a great turnout, considering these things don't happen that often, and I know people are busy, but I don't know. I just keep saying, like, the theater experience is such a cool thing, and I can't tell people how to spend their time, but I hope we don't lose it. I hope there's enough, at least from the surf audience, attention that we can keep doing it. Hollywood's sort of figuring out its ways to do it. It leans heavy on the tent poles and the things with the big ad spends, and um, but it is a spectacle. Film is, there's a magical quotient to the sleight of hand of filmmaking, even through documentary, and there's something to be said about experiencing that, big with people.
Yeah.
How about you? You've liked anything recently?
Um, no, but Furiosa's been on my
Yeah.
watch list. We'll probably get around to that one this weekend. But I was just going to say the good news is the Florida Surf Film Festival sells out. They
Love it.
do quarterly screenings, and they sell out every quarter for 2 nights in a row. And I've gone to probably 4 or 5 of them at this point, and it revitalizes my faith in
Yeah.
the medium and the communal experience, because
Good.
it is the coolest thing ever. And huge credit goes to the guys who are organizing it, Kevin Miller and John Brooks, because they do put a tremendous amount of work into it, but they create an atmosphere that it's New Smyrna Beach also, which is kind of obviously a surf community, but it's also a small community. So I think they all want to get together. It might be harder to rally a large city together or something. I don't know, but it's a phenomenal experience, and it's one of my favorite nights a year when I go.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
There's so many festivals now, not just surf festivals, film festivals. Everybody seems to have one, so it is a bit daunting, even to decide, okay, I made something, where would I like to show it, and obviously
Yeah.
there's curators, and as festival goers, we trust that festival with picking stuff we're gonna like. But it's interesting. I mean, that model from the surf point of view, it's that tricky thing of, like you said, if that's the only place people are going to see it, then you certainly want to do it. Um, is it marketing your film so that if your only way to make money is that they buy it later? I don't know. That's a little tricky too. I know with
Yeah.
Bella Vita, we did a lot of festivals, and I feel like that maybe cannibalized later downloads and whatnot because people had
Interesting.
seen it, and it's not the type of movie like One California Day where you might watch again and again. It's a little more of, I've seen Furiosa. I don't need to own Furiosa, not that
Yeah.
Bella Vita's Furiosa, but it's a film, it's an experience. And then you want to go have a different one. And I get that,
Yeah.
So I commend these guys. Some Like It Classic also played, and they went and shot 16 millimeter film. I don't know that filmmaker. He's from France, but self-financed it, and I just applaud that. Like, I have to go and buy a ticket to that,
Yeah.
and I challenge my other friends and lovers of surf media to do the same in their town.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what we need to do if we want to keep seeing cool stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree completely. And that's why we're having this conversation and directing people to Confluence. One other thought that I had, just if people are listening and they are interested in surf film, the most recent screening at the Florida Surf Film Festival was a week or two ago, and they screened Water Brother, which is the new 𝐂𝐚𝐿 documentary
Oh
profile
yeah.
film. And I've seen that as well. I watched it a couple of months ago. It's fantastic. And I think it should probably get a broad release in the coming 6 months or so. So you should keep a lookout for that too. It's a great figure in surfing who they do a pretty comprehensive job telling his story.
Yeah, I mean, as a West Coaster, my East Coast knowledge is sad, but Sid's a guy I've heard of. Like, he's just such a fixture. And we screened, I think, Bella Vita out there and got to go to one of the board swaps where, and
Oh
it,
yeah,
it
yeah.
was just such a cultural event. My friends had said, you got to come see this, you're going to love it. And I did. I loved every bit of it. So I'm glad that film is made. And I think I saw maybe Amazon rental ability, or I thought I saw that. So hopefully,
it will be available at some point. It's not quite
yeah.
yet, but yeah, that board
Okay.
swap thing, I forgot about that. I remember he was doing it at like Doris Duke's mansion.
Yeah, exactly. It was crazy, right?
Crazy.
I love it.
So
But
fascinating.
that's, this is what makes this little community and culture so unique. It's great, and
Yeah.
the way it bleeds certain things together is always fun.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad I've been able to be a part of it.
Totally. Well, people can find it obviously Confluence on jasonbaffafilms.com, and then September 15th, Sunday, September 15th, right?
Yeah, for those in the 805, we say, Carpinteria, California, we'll be doing the first live show. We're working on the San Diego event. There's a few venues that make sense down there. Not sure on the plan thereafter. And then the Surf Network will have it streaming, and potentially new versions evolving as we speak. So again, it's a bit of an experiment. Join the ride. Let us know what you think or what you want to see, and we'll keep playing in the sandbox.
I love it. And listeners, if you want to give feedback, leave a comment on YouTube right now.
There you
Go down
go.
and engage, which actually I say jokingly in reference to our conversations, but it's been a great thing of posting these on YouTube. It's been a real-time ongoing conversation with, it's not just you and I now. It's now people watching it, and then they engage
Yeah.
in the comments, and
Yeah.
then I can chime in with them. So it's like it keeps the thing going. So it's kind of cool.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
It's also really intimidating.
I know.
Hi, YouTube people.
Yeah.
Well,
All
thanks,
right.
Dave. Congrats on keeping this going and building it. And it's such a cool thing. It's really, it's great. The hard work. It's special to have these stories around forever.
I'm honored to be able to have be in the position to be able to do it. It's been a great honor, actually. So thanks.
Awesome. You got it.
All right, man.
Good to see you as always.
You too. Thank you.
All right. See you in the water.
All right. See ya.
Surf Splendor.